real quick before I get into some updates from some of our plant conservation programs at nature preserves, this is really exciting. Native Plant Society. I'm really excited about the new officers and just all the growth that's happened with Native Plant Society over the years. 40th anniversary. Nature Preserves, Nature Preserves 50th anniversary too. So a big year for um, anniversaries. So lots to celebrate in the plant world for 2026. I'm Tara. Some of you all know me. A botanist, ecologist. I work a lot on rare species conservation and have for a while now. Let's see. I also am a University of Kentucky researcher, working on finishing my PhD, which will happen this year as well. So this is a big year. Um, so I currently manage our biological assessment branch and rare plant recovery programs at the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, and I lead our team of biologists. So across all the work that I've done in my career, conservation, research, coordination through the state's, a plant conservation alliances, I've come to think a lot about connections and how rare species are linked to other species and how they're embedded in natural communities and how these natural communities connect to landscapes. So that leads me to the question of why does plant conservation matter? Why are we doing this? I know I'm preaching to the choir, so I'll be really brief. Plant conservation matters because plants are the foundation of life. They create the structures of ecosystems, habitats, food webs, interactions that everything else depends on. So when plants are lost, it's not just individual species that disappear, it's ecological function. So I know Kendall put those few slides on who Nature Preserves was, but I always have those in here too. So I'll just fly through this. Our agency, 50th anniversary this year, we're the Natural Heritage and Natural Areas program for the state. So our role is to connect science with conservation, and we do this through inventory, protection, recovery, long-term management. We've got a lot of different statutes and laws that mandates a lot of our work. Our heritage program houses the state's biodiversity database that Kendall mentioned as well. Everything starts with data, documenting what exists and where. So for each species that I work on or that we work on, we ask questions of what is it, where is it at, how's it doing, and if it's not doing good, how do we figure out how to conserve it? So this data feeds into state, regional, and global assessments through the NatureServe network, who is our parent organization. And this is what allows conservation planning to be proactive rather than reactive. And, through our state's natural areas programs, we've created a statewide system of nature preserves that our office manages that protects some of the best remaining natural areas in the state. And we work with lots of partners on species conservation on their own properties as well. So we do a lot. There's we turned 50 this year, so you're going to be hearing a lot from our office, on all the things that we've accomplished. So lots to celebrate. So Kentucky, native plants in Kentucky. We're botanically rich, not because we have the highest number of plant species nationally, because we can't really compete with like California or Texas or Florida, but we've got a really high concentration of unique plants and natural communities. So like high elevation mountains in like the eastern part of the state to like the low lying swamps and sloughs of the coastal plain in far western Kentucky. So let's see. So our species, many species have their range limits here. And for some globally rare plants, Kentucky supports a large portion of the remaining population. So every 4 years, our flora is evaluated for state and federal status. So we update our S ranks and our rare plant lists, like endangered and threatened. And this is another round. This is the 4th year. So in 2026, that's a big project that we're going to be working on. So what this map shows on here is this is a rare plant hotspot map. And you see here places like this shows where there's a large concentration of plant diversity and rare species. So of course the Cumberland Plateau is a big one. You've got the high elevation mountains over here, Pine, Cumberland. There's the Kentucky River, all of these glades and prairies and, more open, grassland species, all the wetlands in far western Kentucky. Um, so these are the areas where we focus a lot of our conservation efforts. Okay, so as the state's listing authority, we track rarity of the flora, and about a quarter of our flora is considered rare. Why are these species rare? I'm preaching to the choir here again. There's lots of threats. A big one, loss of habitat. Some of you all have seen that map that we created over a decade ago, Kentucky Then and Now, that looked at like how the landscape has changed so much over the past couple hundred years. Massive change. And with that came the loss of many species, including plants. But some plants are on the edge of their range, so they're considered rare. Some are endemic with a small range. Some species were probably always rare because they're associated with a rare habitat. But other species, that we work on used to be much more common, but have declined because of all these threats. And I'll just mention here, a quarter of the flora is rare, but like some plant families, namely like the orchid family, are disproportionately rare. So about 50% of that family are rare and listed and being tracked. So just throwing that out there. And one of the most important lessons that we have learned in the work that we've done is that protection alone definitely is not enough. 65% of the rare plants that we work on occur in more open habitats that are disturbance dependent. They need fire, brush management. These are like open systems that are, grasslands, wetlands, woodlands. And if we can manage for these species in the right way, we can recover many of these rare plants. So land management is key for the overwhelming majority of a lot of the plants that we work on. Management sometimes isn't immediate, the effects of management. So long-term monitoring is essential. And we work, our biologists and land managers work together on monitoring. We've established a lot of long-term monitoring plots on communities and species across the state. And this data allows us to evaluate management success and adapt our approaches based on how species and communities actually respond. So the program that has probably shaped my thinking the most about how to recover and conserve, really rare plants is our federally listed and globally rare plant recovery program that's supported through the Section 6 of the Endangered Species Act. So I've worked on this program my entire career. Each year we actively work on, roughly a dozen species, give or take. We overall, focus on, about 30. But for every species, recovery involves a consistent set of actions. So what's important is not the number of species, it's the approach. So this consistent set of actions. So, conducting status surveys, long-term monitoring, active management, protecting the site. I already harped on management is key with keeping those disturbance dependent habitats open and the species that occur there. But every species that we work on faces invasive species pressure. Another essential piece is integrating in situ work and ex situ work, propagation and seed banking. So we're safeguarding genetic diversity while we work on the recovery in the field. The plants that we work on, range from beautiful, tiny, obscure little mustards that are some of my favorite little ugly mustards that I call them lovingly, that only a botanist can love, that have really cool histories and ecology, to like really, showy orchids. And so some of you have heard, a lot of our work on white fringes orchid. This is one that our program, works on a lot every year. So it's just kind of one of our model species. This So we're currently working on recovering all of the known populations of white fringes orchid in the state, restoring the hydrology and structure of the wetlands that they occur in, is kind of the foundation of that work. And from there, we evaluate restoration actions that affect the orchid through long-term monitoring and adaptive management. So this species, has become a focal point for research. And that includes, work on associated species like pollinators, fungal associations, other associated plants, because understanding all those interactions is essential for recovery. So I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of highlights on some of the species that we work on. One of the and some new research that's recently come out. We have published some recent work on some of our white fringeless orchid recovery and monitoring work. I've finally figured out how to make a QR code. So here's a QR code that links to that paper, and that kind of goes over some of our initial wetland restoration work and how that work affected the rare orchids and the associated flora there. So really cool stuff. I don't have time to go into any of that, but please, look at that paper with white fringeless orchid and a lot of our rare plants now. We have entomologists now at nature preserves, and we're growing that program as well. And so we're studying a lot more pollinators and fungal, interactions for that matter. But just focusing on the insect ecology of some of these rare plants, we've, with using white fringeless orchid as an example, we've discovered 5 new pollinators that we had no idea even pollinated this orchid. And we've, documented a lot of new insect pest interactions that have negative effects like aphids and weevils. So we've also started noticing trends of different pollinator assemblages in the different wetlands with varying canopy covers. So how land management also changes those pollinator assemblages. It's super cool stuff. Something that we're focusing a lot this past few years, we've built these Raspberry Pi cameras that we put in the field. Most of the time we're just staring at plants and then we see the pollinators that way. But now we're setting up cameras as well to capture additional insect interactions when we're not in the field. And this is one of those. This is the pawpaw sphinx moth on white fringeless orchid that we just discovered a couple months ago. Super cool stuff. And these sphinx moths are only in the open habitats. They're not in the woodland or closed habitats. So how all of the different species and their interactions, are tied to the communities is really interesting. So we published this work as well. So here's another link to some of that invertebrate pollinator and pests of white fringeless orchid work. And I can put these in the chat later. For white fringeless orchid, I mentioned, connecting that in situ and ex situ, aspect. And we do that for a lot of plants. For white fringeless orchid, last year we worked with Atlanta Botanical Garden for several years to grow plants and seed bank, and last year we were able to have that full circle. It took about 5 years of collecting seed, growing them, and then last year, and then restoring or managing and prepping the habitat, and then last year we were able to create a new population of white fringeless orchids. So lots of cool stuff going on there that I can go on and on about, but won't. And it's hard to not talk about this aspect as well. We've worked so much on white fringeless orchid. That paper that I had just finished on, the first 15 years of restoring white fringeless orchid and seeps, like a week after I finished it, the site that paper was about was leveled by an EF4 tornado. And look, there's Quinn sitting in the middle of all of this right there. But it leveled the wetlands and all the trees and the site, uh, as we, so our efforts, it was shocking. In our efforts, we're slowed down for a bit, and now we're refocusing. And now, as we figure out how to restore a tornado salvage site with rare wetlands, I just wanted to throw this out in terms of you never know what's going to happen. There's a lot of threats, and this is one of them, extreme weather events. But there is hope. We are going to, continue to work on this site and restore the orchids. And, now it's a very open habitat. So I'm excited, I'm not saying I'm excited about this, but it is interesting from a research perspective of how these communities are going to evolve over time. And a month after the tornado hit, and this grass pink orchid popped up. So that was a sign of hope. Kentucky clover is another example that I won't go into. That we did a lot of that same work with. So key takeaways and looking forward, and then I'll end it here. For plant conservation and how we focus on it at nature preserves, and is, of course, the integration of in situ and ex situ conservation. Of course, our ongoing recovery, conservation, and research work on our rare plants in communities continues. We have expanded a lot of orchid conservation work with researchers over the past couple of years. This year, we are going to be publishing the updated rare plant list. So some of you on the call will probably get an email inviting you to the rare plant committee for this year. So, if you were on that 4 years ago, this is this is the year for that as well. So we're looking for help reviewing. And then we're working on a new rare plant and natural community database website that will be finalized before the field season starts. So we'll announce that as well. And then we're going to be organizing a Plant Conservation Alliance Steering Committee this year to help focus our conservation efforts and coordination.